The night was alive with glittering lights from the Grand Hotel's towering windows, casting golden reflections on the polished marble steps that led to the main entrance. A stream of guests flowed out of the event hall, their laughter and chatter echoing into the cool air as chauffeurs pulled sleek cars up to the curb. Among them, one vehicle stood apart, a black luxury sedan with tinted windows, shining as though it had just rolled off the showroom floor. The driver stood nearby, straight-backed and silent, scanning the crowd for the man he served. Inside the hotel lobby, the millionaire adjusted his cufflinks, his sharp suit tailored so precisely it seemed sculpted onto him. Every movement carried the quiet authority of a man used to controlling rooms, commanding board meetings, and buying silence with a single flick of his pen. His eyes, however, betrayed a hint of weariness. The endless congratulations, the false smiles, the shallow conversations, they were the expected rituals of wealth, but tonight they left him drained. He wanted nothing more than to disappear into the solitude of his own car, away from the noise. When he stepped out, the crowd seemed to shift around him like a current around a rock. Some paused, whispering his name, others tried to catch his eye. But he didn't slow. The driver, recognizing the look on his employer's face, instinctively moved to open the rear door. Yet the millionaire lifted a hand. "Not tonight," he said in his low, commanding voice. "I'll drive." The driver hesitated, surprise flickering across his face. This was unusual. But he nodded, handing over the keys without a word. The millionaire's polished shoes clicked softly against the pavement as he approached the car. His reflection stared back at him in the glossy black surface, and for a moment, he studied himself, the untouchable image, the power, the carefully maintained mask. He exhaled slowly before pulling open the door. The interior smelled faintly of leather and cedarwood polish, the scent of wealth and control. He slid into the driver's seat, enjoying the silence that wrapped around him the instant he shut the door. The chatter from the hotel faded into nothing but muffled echoes beyond the glass. Alone, finally, he loosened his tie, his hand brushing against the steering wheel, his empire at his fingertips once more. But something about the air felt different. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. His instincts, honed from years of negotiation and survival in ruthless business, stirred. A prickle crawled along the back of his neck. He shook it off, inserting the key and starting the engine. The hum purred to life, smooth and reassuring, but it didn't calm the unease in his chest. As he reached for the gearshift, the leather behind him gave the faintest creak, the kind of sound only a body could make when shifting weight. His pulse quickened. Before he could turn, a hand shot forward, firm and trembling, clamping tightly over his mouth. His body stiffened, shock coursing through him as he stared at the dark windshield. A woman's face, hardly hidden in the dim glow of the dashboard, leaned close to his ear. He could feel her rapid breath, the heat of her urgency. His first instinct was to fight back, but her grip wasn't violent, it was desperate. "Don't make a sound," she whispered, her voice sharp but breaking at the edges. The words vibrated against his skin, chilling and raw. His heart thundered. Who was she? How had she gotten into his car? And why, in that trembling but determined voice, did she sound as though she already knew him far too well? The moment stretched, fragile and dangerous. He didn't know it yet, but nothing in his carefully constructed world would ever be the same again. His breath caught beneath. The press of her hand, the scent of her skin sharp and human in contrast to the sterile perfection of the car. The world outside the tinted glass was filled with laughter, footsteps, and engines rumbling as valets rushed about, yet inside the vehicle it was as though they had slipped into another universe, a tense, suffocating bubble of silence and fear. His pulse hammered against her palm, and his eyes darted sideways, catching the faint outline of her face in the dashboard's glow. "Listen to me," she hissed, her voice a low, urgent rasp. "If you shout, if you try anything, I swear you'll regret it." It wasn't the threat itself that startled him. He was used to threats. He'd built his empire wading through them, from hostile takeovers to enemies in the shadows who had tried to claw at his fortune. No, what unsettled him was the tremor beneath her words, the kind that didn't belong to a criminal or a blackmailer but to someone whose entire existence balanced on this moment. She was shaking. He could feel the faint quiver in her arm even as she kept her hand firmly across his mouth. Slowly, deliberately, he raised one hand from the steering wheel and placed it on hers. His touch was light, not forceful, his eyes locking with hers in the reflection of the rearview mirror. It was a silent agreement. I won't scream. Let me breathe. For a beat, she didn't move. Then, with a sharp inhale, she released him. Her hand fell back, clenching into a fist in her lap, while her chest rose and fell in quick, uneven breaths. He coughed lightly, regaining his composure, though his heart still raced beneath his immaculate shirt. Do you realize what you've just done? His voice was quiet but laced with steel, the kind of tone that had made CEOs crumble in boardrooms. Her eyes met his in the mirror, and in that gaze he saw fire and anguish tangled together. Do you realize what you did? She shot back, her voice cracking but filled with a fury that silenced him more effectively than her hand had. He turned in his seat now, studying her properly. She was younger than he expected, her face pale and taut with determination. Strands of hair fell across her cheeks, disheveled as if she had been waiting in that cramped space for hours, rehearsing this moment over and over. Her clothes weren't glamorous. They spoke of ordinary life, of someone who didn't belong in his polished world of excess and opulence. And yet she sat in his car, invading his sanctuary as if she had every right. What do you want? He asked slowly, his voice measured. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, silence pressed down again. Then she leaned forward, her words so sharp they seemed to slice through the thick leather air between them. I don't want your money. I don't want your name. I want the truth. The millionaire's brow furrowed. Truth. Of all the things she could have demanded, it wasn't wealth, wasn't ransom, wasn't influence, it was truth. That single word echoed in his chest, disorienting him. She saw the flicker of confusion in his eyes and pressed on. You've hidden it for years, but I know. I know what you did. I know who you are when the world isn't watching. His throat tightened. He masked it quickly, his expression cooling into the practiced calm of a man who had weathered scandals and accusations before. But inside, unease twisted. Her voice wasn't the voice of gossip or rumor. She spoke as if she had lived the story herself. Be very careful, he warned, his tone darkening. Accusations without proof can destroy you. Her laugh was bitter, hollow. Destroy me. You already did that years ago. The words struck him harder than any weapon could have. His chest went rigid, his breath short. She leaned closer, her eyes burning with something between grief and hatred. You don't remember me yet, she whispered, her voice trembling now. But you will, and when you do, I want you to feel exactly what I felt every single day because of you. The hum of the car's engine was the only sound for a long moment. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, not to drive but to steady himself. Whoever this woman was, she hadn't come for wealth or power. She had come for him, and the secret she carried was one he thought had been buried long ago. For the first time in years, the millionaire felt cornered, not by rivals, not by contracts or lawsuits, but by the unflinching eyes of the woman sitting behind him. He had always known how to wield silence, how to bend it into power, but this silence wasn't his to control. It belonged to her, heavy and accusing, pressing down until the air itself felt poisonous. He forced himself to meet her gaze in the rearview mirror. You speak in riddles, he said, his voice even, though inside his thoughts were racing. If you want answers, you'll have to be clear. Her jaw clenched. Fine, she said, her voice low but fierce. Do you remember a factory outside the city? 10 years ago, a fire that no one ever truly explained. His stomach dropped, though his face betrayed nothing. That fire had been scrubbed from the headlines within weeks, the story swallowed whole by money, power, and carefully crafted press statements. To the world, it had been an accident, tragic, but unpreventable. To him, it was a ghost he had locked away. I don't, he began, but her voice sliced through him. Don't you dare lie to me. Her fists trembled where they pressed into her knees. My father died in that fire. He trusted the company, he trusted you. And when the truth threatened to come out, when people began asking questions, you buried it. You buried him. You buried all of us. Her words struck like blows, each one dragging shadows from the corners of his memory. He remembered the late-night phone calls, the frantic executives, the panicked investors. The decision had been made quickly. Silence the whistleblowers, pay off the press, protect the brand at all costs. It had worked, at least on the surface. But apparently, the past had a way of clawing back. The woman's eyes glistened in the faint dashboard light. I was 16. I watched my mother fall apart. I watched everything we had burn, not just the factory, but our lives. And do you know what it's like to scream for justice while people like you sip champagne and laugh as if nothing ever happened? He swallowed hard, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. For a man who had crushed competitors with a smile, who had walked away from scandals untouchable, he felt oddly stripped bare by her words. There was no boardroom, no lawyers, no carefully drawn contracts here, just her truth, sharp and unyielding. Why come to me now? He asked, his tone softer, though still guarded. Why tonight? Because tonight the whole world was applauding you, she said bitterly. Another award, another speech about your generosity, your brilliance. And I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed you to look me in the eye and hear what you really are. I needed to know if you would deny it, or if, even for a second, you'd show you had a soul left. Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away. She wanted to see the truth on his face, not in headlines or courtrooms. For the first time, his mask faltered. His jaw tightened, his breath caught, and a flicker of something, regret, or perhaps guilt, crossed his features. He quickly smoothed it away, but she had seen it. Her eyes narrowed, her lips trembling with a mix of triumph and heartbreak. You remember, she whispered. He sat frozen, the wheel beneath his hands suddenly foreign, the hum of the engine a hollow reminder that he was trapped with her until this storm passed. She had torn open a wound he had spent a decade pretending didn't exist. And yet, buried beneath the weight of shame and anger, a single thought surfaced, dangerous, unsettling. If she knew this much, if she had tracked him here, then she might know more. Secrets no one else in the world was supposed to hold. He inhaled deeply, steadying himself. If you came here for vengeance, he said quietly, then say it. If you came here for justice, you'll never find it in this car. So tell me, what do you really want from me? The woman leaned forward, her eyes burning holes through him. I want the truth, she repeated, her voice breaking. And I want you to finally admit it wasn't an accident. The words hung between them, a deadly ultimatum. For the first time in his life, the millionaire didn't know how to answer. The car seemed to shrink around them, the silence stretching so thin it threatened to snap. The millionaire sat rigid in the driver's seat, his knuckles whitening around the steering wheel as the woman's words echoed through the confined space. Admit it, not an accident. The demand pressed down heavier than any corporate scandal, heavier than all the secrets he had paid to erase. He turned slowly to face her, his expression unreadable, though his eyes betrayed the storm inside. You think you know the truth, he said finally, his voice low, smooth, controlled. But truth is never that simple. Your father, he made choices. Risky ones. Dangerous ones. Her face tightened, rage and pain flashing in her eyes. Don't you dare blame him. Don't you dare twist this to protect yourself. He tried to warn people. He begged your company to shut down the machines. He begged for safety measures. But you ignored him. You cut corners because profit mattered more than lives. Her voice rose, shaking with fury, but also with the fragility of someone carrying years of grief. Tears rimmed her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. You killed him. Maybe not with your hands, but with your silence. With your greed. The words pierced him, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. He wanted to deny it, to summon that icy shield that had saved him countless times. Yet, when he looked at her, really looked, he saw more than anger. He saw the wreckage of a life destroyed, and in that reflection, he glimpsed the faint shadow of himself. A younger man, ambitious and desperate, willing to sacrifice anything to rise. He had buried that man, convinced himself the end justified the means. But here she was, the proof that ghosts didn't stay buried. His voice faltered when he spoke again. You think I didn't feel it? You think I didn't remember every face, every name on that report? I told myself it was necessary. I told myself it was the price of building something bigger than myself. But not a day goes by that I don't hear the screams in my sleep. The confession slipped out, raw and unguarded, and for the first time, the mask cracked fully. His shoulders slumped as though carrying the weight of 10 years all at once. She blinked, stunned, her breath hitching. She had prepared for denial, for anger, for lies. But not this. Not the sight of the man the world revered as unshakable suddenly unraveling before her. "So you admit it," she whispered. "I admit." He shut his eyes, pain tightening his features. "I admit that I chose silence. I admit that I could have stopped it. And I admit that I buried the truth because I was afraid of losing everything." His eyes opened again, wet, though no tears fell. "And I admit that I will never forgive myself for that night." For a long moment, neither spoke. The engine hummed softly, indifferent to the storm raging inside the car. She sat, rigid, her chest rising and falling as though the weight of his confession pressed on her lungs. Finally, she shook her head, a broken laugh escaping her lips. "You think admitting it changes anything? My father is still dead. My family is still ruined. And you got to keep living like a king while we scraped through the dirt." He didn't argue. For once, the man who always had the perfect answer said nothing. Her hand trembled as it reached for the door handle, but she paused, her voice shaking. "I didn't come here for revenge. I wanted to see if you were human at all. Now I know." Her eyes locked with his, a final burning stare filled with sorrow, with hatred, but also with something else, a faint flicker of release. She had carried this secret for years, a poison inside her, and tonight she had poured it out. The door opened, the cold night air rushing in. She slipped out without another word, disappearing into the shadows as swiftly as she had come. The millionaire sat frozen, his reflection fractured in the rearview mirror. For the first time, the empire he had built felt meaningless. He was left not with applause or victory, but with the echo of her words and the unbearable truth that no wealth, no power, could wash away the stain of that fire. And in that silence, he realized he was no longer the man who had stepped into the car minutes ago. He was something far more fragile, something the world would never see.